So I think we got people working in. Everybody looks bright and cheery. A few of the folks that I know that I happened to see last night at a few of the different hotels actually look better than I expected. So that's pretty good. That's kind of what these conferences are all about. I think a lot of times a lot of the activity happens after the meetings are over with and we get a chance to chat, not only during the sessions but also at the hotels and some of the dinners that are going on during the show. So I'm going to kick off. My name is Greg Bailey. I'm the founder and CEO of SharkPro Software. I'll be delivering quite a bit of the presentation today, but I also do have a co-presenter that we weren't able to get on the slides quite in time, but he'll come up here, and I want to introduce Aaron Seals, who's the director of the PMO at Children's Hospital in Dallas. So this way we can kind of mix things up a little bit and have multiple speakers as well. Because really what the session is about today is talking about companies that have used other technologies, and we all know there's a lot of them in the market, and how they made the decision either to come to Microsoft Project Server, as well as I will talk about how there are some organizations that even though they use Project Server, they still have some of these other tools in place. And so, as we all know, in some cases, we do have to live with that kind of an environment. So, it'd be great to say that, we're bringing in Project Server, we're kicking out every other tool that we have, but, we also know at some point someone made an executive decision to purchase that tool, and it's not always as easy as just saying, let's just do a rip out and replace of our entire environment. So I will talk a bit about, too, how do you live sort of in that coexistence in an environment where an organization might be a global organization using multiple tools, as well as we'll give you some case studies and live examples of how people have done that in environment. So we do have some of our customers here, so I want to welcome them as well. So they'll keep me straight on the presentation, and anybody that's looking at SharkPro or looking at some of the other vendors in the space here, feel free to ask us questions, either here or over at the booth. The other thing that I will mention ahead of time, and I did validate to make sure I had my phone turned off, so just kind of take a look at that. This is always a good time to kind of check our phones. So I'm going to make sure I do that real quick here. And so some of this is just the commercials that they have us do as we get started. So I want to really talk a little bit about not only just the product, but also I want to talk about why are people even using these tools. So this isn't necessarily a return on investment, but I do know some folks that I've talked to this week really are looking at upgrading to Microsoft Project Server. And so they have to justify to their executives and to their VPs and their bosses, why do we move to another tool? Why can't we use what we have? Or they also are even saying, we're looking to implement a new technology. What's the benefit of that? So I do want to talk a little bit about what am I finding as I'm out there talking to executives in terms of what the current economic climate is, probably a lot of things you're facing, but then actually get into kind of the technology itself. And again, the only reason I'm doing that is we all know project management is just hard. We can do it manually, we can do it with spreadsheets, but really it's just not an easy thing to manage projects. The tool is a part of it that would enable us to facilitate doing more effective reporting and visualization, and no matter what the tool is, we do have to have a reason why we're even putting these tools in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then actually get into look at some of the existing tools, mainly to let you know that we are familiar with what their good points are, maybe some of the areas that there are some challenges and why people are migrating to those, and then I'll bring up and have Aaron talk about his case study of migrating from HP's PPM technology to Project Server. And then I'll do an executive summary at the end. Just a quick thing on SharkPro. What are we all about? We're trying to make your life easier. So everything that we've done since the company was founded was saying, we know companies are trying to implement Microsoft Project Server or other technologies, so how can we make it where your life is easier and also we get you there faster? Now, I will tell you this isn't the plane that I flew here on. I wish it was, so the marketing folks do try to make me feel really good about myself, and so they have built it out. We're not there yet. But we do, really have quite a few big aspirations here. We were Microsoft Partner of the Year finalists last year. We still haven't been able to take a month off, but this is one of those things where we do try to even say with you, with the technologies and tools we deliver, that you can take a month off. And we just really say that more or less. How do we shrink that time, shrink that effort that you're spending on doing implementations or on your work to allow you to even have what I say is even more an effective family life. Because I don't know about you, we get so busy with work, we end up doing so many emails, we take a lot of work home with us. There needs to be a way that we can make our lives easier and we can actually even have more of an effective personal life. And so, again, as I do these sessions, I do like to talk a little bit about that work-life balance because I think it's important. It's so easy for us to get focused on work and delivering things effectively, but we do forget that we have to support our families and make sure that we're doing the right things by them as well. So SharkPro, what do we do? In essence, we have software. So we have 3 different software products that we deliver, and then we also are a services company. So in general, I'm not going to go into too much more other than that. You can go visit our booth or obviously come and visit us tonight at the Arizona Science Center. SharkPro does have the entire Science Center rented out. You're going to be able to do all of the events that they have there, do the rock climbing. I think they actually have sort of a event where you can go across the entire Arizona Science Center. Lionel Hanley, I'm going to give Lionel credit for having the custom drinks. Also, look for Sharky running around the Arizona Science Center at the show tonight. One thing I will tell you, though, and this is a little trick, there are a couple of those events that they will not let you do if you've had a cocktail, my understanding is, because they are pretty sort of crazy events. So go do those crazy events before you get your drink badge. So that was just a little sneaky thing if you are wanting to do both there. So who uses SharkPro? And this will be the last thing on us, is really what we do is we're talking to mid-sized companies or larger organizations that really are saying, give us some kind of a base configuration, give us some kind of templates, or light up our existing deployment. So we do have a lot of organizations that already have Project Server or have 2007 or going to 2010, but they really want to leverage and light up with really some really great web parts, a lot of existing dashboards, a lot of great reports. So, one of the companies we work with, and then also we really do a lot of work with what I would say departments of larger organizations. So a couple of the case studies I'll mention really were large global companies that actually had existing, say, competitive system in place in their IT group, but then all of these business units wanted to be able to manage projects. There was a finance department, there was a marketing department, there was a smaller IT department in another country, and they wanted to be able to do project management, and they wanted Project Server. So we were able to get that into that department, even though they had a corporate standard in place. So we will talk about that. So in general, this is who uses the SharkPro, either software or services, and generally who we're working with. So talking a little bit about the current economic climate. Now, if you're invested in the stock market, I think you can feel pretty good, but I would still say I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've heard from some of the CEOs, some of the latest trends from Dow Jones, and then I'm going to get into a little bit too, what am I still seeing from what are the obstacles and roadblocks, even if you're migrating from some of these existing tools to Project Server. And again, even as you're trying to justify these systems, what are the things that the executives are asking for to say, why are you implementing these tools? So I'm going to kind of cover a little bit of each of those. So I will say, in general, people are more optimistic. But I would say we're not out of the woods yet. And again, this is just my general observations and some of the folks that we work with. I think even in your organizations, as you know, the budget has not completely been freed up yet. I mean, really, we know that they're still cutting departments. We know they're still shrinking down the resources. They're still not saying, hey, let's kick off every single project that's out there. So again, in general, I would just say when we look at the climate of the CEOs, and even as you're implementing these systems, or even as you think about migrating from one of the tools that you have, someone's going to want to ask, why are we spending this money? Because we can do other things with this money. We can buy new equipment, we can hire new people, we can kick off new projects. So just to let you know that, what I'm seeing is that there's still some caution out there. So, you're going to go back, you're going to get real excited about what you're seeing with Project Server, you're going to hear all these great customer case studies and all these stories, but just to let you know from a little bit behind the scenes, they're still going to want to know why are you doing this, and how are you going to justify this project, and, CFO may have to sign something, you still have to kind of work through some of those items that you have. Okay. So, and I'm not going to read all these slides are all available to you. Part of the reason I wanted to do this and not just get into the tool right off and talk about how to actually migrate is, again, you may go back to your organizations and have to do some of this justification. So part of it is I wanted to give you a sense for what are they thinking? You know, what are the CEOs thinking? What are the executives thinking? What are the things that they're doing in the board meetings when they're justifying and approving all of this systems that they have in place? So some of you are starting to go through your capital planning process for the new year. And so a lot of times when you're looking at capturing all those requests for the capital planning and you're starting to do your budgeting for the new year, and some folks are trying to get a system in place to be able to do that capital planning now, I just wanted to let you know, too, that you're competing, you know, as we look at Project Server and we look at implementing it and we look at the services around that and buying software products, you know, we are really competing with, you know, all of the other projects everybody's throwing in. Now, one of the things I wanted to let you know is that when we look at the downturn we were in, and I would say, I don't know if anybody would say that we weren't in a downturn, but we were in a downturn, and it was pretty tough. People put things on hold. I think things are turning up. We're still going to see, even when we look at the companies that we're working with, some of them are going to have a hard time. And so part of what I'm hearing is that a lot of your organizations, as you look at trying to justify these systems, and some of the executives say, really, we need to hold off, or, you know, we're not quite there yet. Typically, we're finding that a lot of organizations will end up going down because they didn't take this opportunity to put these systems in place. So again, I'm just kind of letting you know that even though we've gone through this downturn, you know, things are starting to go a little bit better. Some people might say, well, let's just wait a little bit longer. Really, companies go out of business when they don't do that. And some of them are big companies, and some of them get acquired, and you end up with mergers and acquisitions. So again, in general, from an executive perspective, think about the fact that, you know, as you're justifying this, what are they thinking up there, you know, in the C-suite as you're trying to justify this stuff, and especially depending on the dollar value that you're getting for these. All right, we do know, and again, part of this, I wanted to put some new statistics in. SharkPro just had a large organization do a bunch of interviews for us and pull a lot of this together, that the failure rates are still high. Some of these are new. I mean, a lot of times we pull these old statistics out there, but in general, we need to still get these systems in place because we still cannot deliver the products and projects as effectively as we would like. So one of the things I wanted to mention here is that although we do see the failure rates getting somewhat better, it's not really that much better yet. And so what I want to go through as I go through this is why. You know, so we've got other systems. So a lot of organizations have other systems in place, right? Clarity, HP, I'm going to talk about them, @Task, whatever the tools are. So you would think, since I have a software product in place, wouldn't we be more effective delivering these tools? There's more tools now in the market than ever before, right? So why aren't these getting better? Well, I'll talk a little bit about how I think why that's happening and how we can make it more effective, even if you're migrating to a project server environment, that you ensure that that's going to be effective. It's not just a tool that's in place, but you're actually delivering the products and services that you build more effectively. Now, I do talk about mid-market companies, and I would say in general, we can think of global organizations, and I know Microsoft terms mid-market actually is a pretty large organization. You know, it could be 5,000 employees, 5,000 desktops. A lot of times their definition is different. So in your environment, it could be you're a mid-market. In your mind, it's a large company, but you know, mid-market by CIO, mid-market organization could be a large one. They still have quite a few issues. And what I'm going to talk through is we would think that the mid-market companies actually would be pretty effective because, right, they're smaller, their teams are a little lighter, the executives are closer to it. That's not necessarily the case. The mid-market companies actually probably have a much higher failure rate than even the larger organizations in a lot of cases. Now, one of the things, too, is a lot of times we think about the fact when we look at delivering these projects, if we have a possibility of obviously taking that effort months shorter, we're going to have a higher success. But we're not necessarily going to guarantee 100% success. And the only reason I'm kind of relating this back a little bit, it's not so much about an implementation of Project Server, but it's about, in general, delivering technology or delivering a software product. I would say let's look at this as a project, delivering an implementation of Project Server. We're talking about migrating from another system, right, to Microsoft's technology. How do we ensure that we're going to have a higher success rate? One way of doing that is shrinking that time to delivery to an end user, and then actually growing and increasing that. So again, not only effort, but also duration does help as we're delivering and making sure the project is a success. So again, talking about how we're going to migrate from a competitive tool to Project Server, how do we make sure that we're, either delivering it quicker, taking less effort on doing that, and also making sure we don't have as many people on the project as needed. So a couple of ways that we can ensure that we're going to get that success. Only reason I bring this up is we know it's costing us a lot of money. I think a lot of times we don't see that, but it really does cost real money. So when organizations look at, I want to do this project versus this project, or help you migrate from this tool to Project Server, by what we do in this room, and I think probably a lot of the people in this room are part of a PMO or part of an IT group, when we don't deliver, we're losing money, where the companies are losing money, and a lot of times we don't think of it that way, but I know as a business owner, I get to see all of that, right? So we approve a lot of projects, get a governance process. Do we do this? Do we this? Do we do this? Do we do this? And so every decision we make and everything that's delivered will impact the bottom line. And it's magnified in a large or small organization as well. So again, when we look at IT, and I'll give you some personal experience on it, it's really important to make sure that we really do what we do effectively. We just recently hired a new chief operating officer and a new director of the PMO. So, having a PMO in place is critical to a success of delivering projects, whether it's for a customer or our own internal work. So,
I have a question.
Yes, question.
Your data on the 63% of IT projects fail, how does that compare with non-IT projects, and where are you getting that data from?
Yep. So the question this is about IT projects. How does it compare with non-IT projects, and where are we getting the data from? In the presentation, which you can't really see it down here, with every one of these, we have got exactly where that data came from. It's from real statistics. Some of them were actually interviews that we had hired a company to do, but a lot of these are from CIO.com, Gartner. I have all of the statistics, and in this deck, I've got those, and I also have non-IT projects as well. So as part of this session, there's only so much we can deliver, but if you send me an email or whatever, I'll get you, every one of these have the background on it, you bet. So it's not just us that are this isn't just a SharkPro statistic that we're bringing up here. So, throughout this, okay, so why did I bring this up? The only reason I brought this up is because I do see a lot of companies that have these other tools in place. And I keep trying to figure out, which we love it, right? They want to migrate to Project Server. There's a lot of reasons Project Server is fantastic. It's really good. But I also a lot of times ask, why are you switching, right? What are some of the reasons? Now, some of it's technical, some of it's user experience, but also, why did that not work? Because, right, you don't want to go through that same path again. Even though Project Server has all this great technology, it works really great, a lot of times it's processes that were in place. So part of what we want to do is go through and think about how do we more effectively deliver that. Okay, so we know projects, and again, why am I doing this? You would almost make it sound like, wow, this is pretty bad. Everyone in this room, we deliver products or we deliver services. And in essence, what it's saying in industry in general, there's a lot of waste. We're having a lot of issues delivering these projects. And so one of the things that we will get to is that these technologies do make this better. So I will tell you that. This will go up. But in general, there's a lot of, when you think about your products and your services that you deliver, a lot of what you're going to end up doing with this project technology is it helps you with the processes that you're putting in place as well. Now, some organizations, and this is from the Governance, Risk Management, and Compliance group, really one of the things that we also deal with is the regulations that are coming down in place. And I'm going to have Aaron talk a little bit about, we just recently were at HIMSS out in Las Vegas, which was a healthcare user conference, and obviously, as we know with the healthcare, a lot of the regulations are coming down. But even in your organizations, that you face, every one of us, really, all of these things impact how we deliver projects. And a lot of it impacts, as you're thinking about implementing these technologies and tools, you do have to think about some of these regulations that are in place. I think we all know that these regulations all cost money. And again, why am I saying this? When you're working to justify going to one of the Project Server or migrate to Project Server from these external tools, one of the things you can use to justify that is we're going to go more effectively be able to implement a lot of these regulations. We're going to be able to make sure that we're tracking against these, and so that we don't, in the long run, end up getting sued or have any issues related to how we deliver these systems that we have.
Question. You have a huge list of these regulations. So are all of these are related to project server deployment, or just you put in general?
So the question was the regulations, right? In general, are these systems that can be managed by Project Server?
No. The question is like HIPAA, ISO, all these things out of these ones, which are relevant to the project server deployment.
Well, so again, I would say in a couple of cases, a number of these are. I have people using this to manage their Sarbanes-Oxley, right? So really there's steps that you have to track, deliverables, and all those very easily. So if we think of a Project Server deployment, there's a governance process, right? It's very much a stage gate-based deliverables checklist, and we'll kind of show you some of the things we do with the out-of-the-box, but we're not trying to make this a sales demo. I see people using it for OPM3, I see people using it for Six Sigma, right? I see people a lot of times using it for a lot of people are putting the COBIT, or they're doing also, how do they do ITSM, management. So I would say a lot of these can be managed with Project Server. I've got a couple of groups that are doing it for grant management. They have to track the grants they're getting from the government now. And they have to make sure that they're reporting back to the government accurate cost and budget against the grants that they receive. All can be done in Project Server. So if you think about it, these are all items or whether you're implementing this or as a company, you have to ensure that you're compliant with that, right? So again, there's a mixture of both, I would say, in there. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do just a quick time check here. All right. And so what I want to do now is, when we think about delivering these projects, and I'm going to start getting into kind of what are these other technologies now. Think about some of the big issues that you're facing. Also, just think about in general, what are the big issues and what are the kind of priorities the organization has, technology and business. And by the way, this is a Gartner, so again, I'm sorry, we'll get that updated. Every one of these has a background on them there. So now what we end up looking at is, why do we do this and what are the tools? And so when you're delivering these technologies and tools and whatever your software you're delivering, you want to think about who are your end users that you're going to deliver this to. Most IT groups, and this is kind of letting us know as you're delivering products, who really do you think you're supporting? Is it the end user? Is it senior management? So this is just a statistic kind of letting people know that in general, they're supporting that end user. And I would say that's good, but in some of these deployments where you're migrating, I would say you want to get quickly to the executives' dashboards. So I would say as you think about, okay, I'm going to get the timesheets out there, right? That's the end users. I'm going to support the end users. I would take a step back and say, that's good, we have to do that, but that might take X amount of time. How can you actually get your enterprise executives or senior IT management? Because most aren't thinking that way. How do you get something quick to the executives that basically are putting the money out for these systems? All right. So I'm going to kind of keep moving through all this. Mainly, this is just to let us know, why are we migrating from other systems? Why are we using these other tools? What's the benefit of doing these tools? So that when you go back and you have to justify this, I wanted to have a lot of meat for you to say, okay, we need to migrate from Clarity. We need to migrate from Project Server. Why are we doing that? So now I'm going to kind of get into the different technologies and tools that we've seen, the different technologies and tools we've migrated from, and actually give you some live case studies and have Aaron come up and talk about some of those as well. So when we look at the products on the market, and I'm only going to kind of do this at a high level, and by the way, I'm just kind of showing you in your bags, you got the latest Gartner MarketScope report, or MarketScape, and generally just showing you some pictures here that Microsoft absolutely is the leader. You know, they still, in terms of number of users out there and the amount of revenue that they do, they're the leading tool. So you're at this conference, which is great. You know, that's good to know that as you migrate from another technology, Microsoft is the leader. So in general, when we look at Microsoft and companies that have these other products, whether it's @Tasks, HP, Clarity, EPM Live, whatever it is, you know, companies have these tools that they're saying, okay, those are good, but now we are ready to go to the next level. I want you to go through a little bit, why did companies even pick these tools in the first place? And then not so much that, but what is it that Microsoft offered that really made these folks want to switch? And then talk about how easy it was to migrate those folks. So, and I'm going to ask, is anybody in the room using @Task? Nope, so I won't go into it. So in general, what I will let you know is when we look at these, and again, I'll just show you the quadrant here. What happened was a lot of these higher end tools, and I'm going to call them higher end, but in general, when you look at the Clarity, the HP, and some of these other tools, a lot of these, what I would call lower end or SaaS vendors, the reason they came into being was they said, Project Server's good or HP's good, but it's too much to deploy. Or you should look at a services engagement to implement that. So that's where a lot of these vendors ended up coming into being, really, right? Offering low cost, quick hit, you know, let's get the system in place. So that's where you started seeing a lot of these tools come into place. The only thing that we started finding was people started hitting limits on those. So that's kind of @Task. They started hitting limits. So I'll talk about some customers that migrated from @Task and why did they migrate. Some users use Oracle, right? Primavera. And you know, I'm based in Houston, so I do work quite a bit, even though I travel over the world, with a lot of engineering, construction, utility companies that use Primavera that people, you know, if you're a scheduler and you've been using it for the last 10 years, you still use it. But I will talk about organizations that recently have migrated from Primavera. One of them speaking this afternoon at 1:45, Pioneer Hybrid. One of our customers, a big division of DuPont. So some of the folks, you may want to go kind of check that out and see how they did that. Other products that we've had migrate are folks from Clarity. So all of this is, by the way, open and published information that's in some of the market scopes and other things that you've seen. When you look at migrating from Clarity, a lot of people have it. How many use Clarity at some organization? Okay, excellent. And I say excellent because it maybe isn't excellent for you, but the fact is that you have it and you're here looking at, okay, how do I either migrate from it or how do I use Project Server and live with it? So we'll talk a little bit about that here too. So we do have a lot of organizations that own Clarity. A lot of times it's used for timesheets. A lot of times they're using it for some of the executive reporting, right? That's the tool of record that we got into place years ago that we're using for that. Some might be using it for resource management, but in general I find some have limited success, right? So it's like anything. It's just, putting resource management in place is difficult anyways, right? So thinking how you get the resource managers communicating with the project managers. So we do have users that we've migrated from Clarity to Project Server 100%, and then we also have cases where users are using Clarity, and then they have Project Server in place, and we're feeding Clarity. But really, the users, 90% of the users are using Project Server and SharkPro, but they're just feeding those fields that are in Clarity for reporting purposes. So part of what you have to think about as you're looking to migrate from any of these tools, and again, I'm not down in any of these tools, right? They're in place, someone's used them, someone purchased them, but you do have to think about, can you replace it? Is there a cost? I've got a lot of organizations now that are looking to upgrade, or they need to get the latest release, so now they're deciding, do I do that, or do I go to Project Server, right? So I will tell you, Project Server generally offers a lot more capability, much easier to use, a lot of things that you're seeing at this conference. And that's where we look at migrating from these tools. It's much easier to do. So what I'd like to do now is bring up Aaron, and Aaron's going to talk about how they migrated from HP PPM, and then we'll talk about some of these others that we have.
Good morning. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm in the midst of a sinus infection, so my voice may be fading in and out. And if I pause to take a drink, bear with me. By no means am I a professional speaker, but what I am is passionate about project management. As I've spent my entire career, the last 13 years, starting out as a lonely analyst with Anderson Consulting in this new thing called a PMO, and to where I am today as director of the Project Management Office for Children's Medical Center in Dallas. So quickly just going to kind of go over, what we were facing. I've been with Children's now almost a year, so coming in, we had a PMO that really wasn't adding any value. We had a decent tool, HP PPM. It just did not provide the entire solution that we were looking for as far as integration with our current tool. And our tool of choice for project planning was Microsoft Project Professional. I'm sure a lot of you use that tool as well as we just put in a new collaboration tool, a central repository called SharePoint 2010, and we wanted to get the most out of that we possibly could, and so it just made sense to look at Microsoft EPM. But we didn't really have, yes?
When did you go to HP? When did you deploy HP originally?
So that was prior to my arrival. They'd been on HP PPM for about 2 years. Didn't really make much progress. And again, it's not only just the tool, it was also the lack of process, it was the lack of standardization. And so, I'm not up here trying to sell you on the tool as a silver bullet. I think we all know it's the combination of a great process, the standardization, married to the tool to be successful. So again, going back, the key was, and again, I can say this being ex-Accenture and consulting, I didn't want to bring in an Accenture. I didn't want to bring in a Deloitte and Ernst & Young and spend the next year doing an assessment and just watching my budget shrink. I needed someone who had experience in the tool, knew it inside and out, as well as understanding our process and the way we, bring projects in and go through our life cycle so that they could help us and partner with us on bringing those two together so that we have the transparency that we needed into the initiatives that we were running. So it was, definitely looking for someone who could come in, turnkey, get us up and going, have some standard reports. I wasn't looking for anything this big wow factor right out of the box. I wanted to keep it basic and to the fundamentals. Let's start out by measuring the variances, not only in our scheduling, but our budgeting, and let's start from there. And as we grow and we mature our process, let's look at some, improving the reporting through other measurements and metrics and utilizing dashboards. So again, I needed someone who could come in, get that going right away so that we could show the organization that we are adding value and not, oh, I'm sorry, we're still in our assessment phase and, we really need to bring in another group to take a look at this and no. I knew what we needed and we needed to get started. So again, talked a little bit about project being our key tool for project planning in the PMO. And we were just being inundated with requests coming throughout the entire organization. On average, we were getting about 6 to 10 requests a week for project management for our services on new initiatives. And so the backlog was growing. They weren't being addressed. We didn't know which ones to work on first, and the ones we did were always the wrong ones. We'd get a call from senior executives, why aren't you working on this one that has an ROI of, $5 million in return over the next 3 years, whatever. Instead, we're focusing on one. Why don't, let's put an Apple store on our intranet, and so our people can get, 5% off Apple products. I mean, that wasn't smart, right? So we needed something that we could bring that to the surface and make sure that we were putting the right resources on the right initiatives. So talked a little bit about visibility and, of course, the collaboration. And with that collaboration led to efficiencies. And with efficiencies, we were able to get a lot more done. And interesting measurement now, coming close to my 1 year, when I started, I kind of just took a quick look at how many projects were each one of my members in the PMO handling on an average. 1 to 2. And you're like, wow. And then I just recently looked at our portfolio and, with the tool, I'll be able to separate by PM and see what our average is now. We are running 4 to 5 significant projects. And again, it depends on the size of the scope, but these are huge initiatives, and I don't know how many of you all are from healthcare, but ICD-10, meaningful use, other significant programs that are challenging in themselves. So we literally, in a year, doubled our productivity through the PMO. And again, it's not all the tool, but the tool married with the process allowed us to get to that point. So. So again, with HP, some of the issues we faced as we engaged them and said, we really need to grow the reporting capability. Well, you need to purchase this module. And that has a maintenance fee of this every year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I'm done. And so we didn't do a rip and replace. We chose to do a slow transition. So we kind of had to take a look at what everything that was in PPM, HP PPM, and say, okay, what makes sense to migrate over and what makes sense based on where it is in the project life cycle to stay in PPM and let it finish the remaining deliverables. And so it was about a 4-month transition to move completely away from HP PPM and turn off that parking meter and move completely over to EPM. So. Oh. We didn't have the demand management piece. It just wasn't cost effective for us when looking at other solutions like EPM. But honestly, I can't remember off the top of my head. Again, when I came in and saw, I was like, okay, I need to focus on getting a better solution in. So quickly, a little bit about Children's Medical Center. We're a not-for-profit. We're the 7th largest pediatric healthcare provider in the nation. We are partnered with UT Southwestern as an academic healthcare facility. We're the only academic healthcare facility around pediatrics in North Texas again. What's kind of cool is we're coming up on our 100th anniversary next year that we've been helping children throughout the world. So we have 2 full-size hospitals. Main one is in Dallas, and we actually just built a specialty center, and so we're probably closer now to 600 beds and approaching 600,000 patients a year. A little bit about my team. So I'm also responsible for the IS governance. We have a few people in there, as well as 12 project managers and an active portfolio of 60 plus. We are a HIM Stage 7, so we are fully immersed in our electronic medical records. We don't use any paper, which is great. And Information Week 500 has recognized us on the better half out of 500 companies across all industries in the nation. So, show of hands, how many are in the healthcare industry? Okay, good. So you know exactly what I'm talking about with and I'm sure you all can relate as well, having to do more with less. And also with a shrinking budget, as you know, healthcare is moving more to an accountable care organization. Reimbursements are changing, so that greatly impacts the budget and so forth. So again, the need is to identify what makes the most sense to be working on, for our resources to be working on. And at the same time, having government mandates and other things pop up that we would have to address quickly, and being able to go to our tool and say, okay, what would we have the least amount of impact if we had to stop right now to pull these key resources off to assign to this compliance or regulatory issue that we have to have addressed in the next 6 months. So again, by having the tool, the process, and the data, we were able to quickly make those adjustments and move full steam ahead. Meaningful use, and at the same time, if by going through this assessment, maintaining our service levels. So we have customers throughout the organization that we have to make sure that we are customer friendly. We are maintaining our part of the bargain as far as keeping certain applications up and running, and introduce new technology along the way. So that was huge for us. Any questions so far? So challenges. As we were going through this migration, we had a growing backlog of probably over 100 requests from throughout the organization that needed to be gauged as far as what made the most sense to be working on. In addition to enhancements that we regularly went through with the applications and the hardware and additional procurements. Where we were at the time, there was no transparency. So we would get a call that, hey, I filled out a ticket to have a new services in the lab or a new application. Where are we? When are you going to get started? And because of our current situation, it was in PPM, and we didn't have a central repository like SharePoint, so it could be buried 10 deep in some file somewhere on a desktop, out on a file share or something like that. So it was key that we get a solution that had that central repository, so that we could quickly respond and say, this is where you're at as far as in the life cycle, and this is what's coming up, and this is what you could expect. Again, talked about resources and focusing on what makes most business sense in the organization, and leveraging the existing Microsoft applications that we already had, like Microsoft Professional, Project Pro, SharePoint, as well as some of the unified communication tools like Link, so that when you're in Microsoft Project and you see someone that you need to reach out to, a resource on a task that's behind, that you could quickly do that. So again, that was some of the capability we were lacking with HP PPM. Need to forget that this is there. So kind of the work management, or what I like to call the intake process, we needed to capture these requests in a consistent, repeatable process so that we could measure the importance and the impact on the organization that these requests would have. And so that's why it was key to get a tool. We pretty much already had a good governance process in place, a structure. So we had a committee with representation from groups all across the hospital, all across the organization, to help score and rank our priorities. So that was key to having in place. But now we needed a tool that we could show, here are the requests coming in, here's the preliminary score, and here's the final score, and here's how we're working them, and here's what's in the queue to be worked when these finish. And if we need to make changes, here's what we need to look at based on the current process or life cycle, where it makes the most sense to stop a project versus one that's maybe a few weeks away from deployment. It wouldn't make sense to stop that one versus one that's still in the requirements gathering phases, those sort of things. So with this tool, we were able to see those and quickly jump on them. So I kind of already mentioned our needs for a web-based solution as far as the intake process. being able to quickly assign resources, see from our resources where the availability was across the organization, better collaboration and productivity, not only with having Project Server in place, but SharePoint as well as Link, or our unified communication tool. Quick and reporting was key. It's like, great, Aaron, you got this new tool, process is doing well, but now I need to see how are you progressing as far as these initiatives? Are you making any progress? Are you behind schedule? Are you trending to be complete on time? And so what was nice was we didn't spend a lot of startup time creating these new reports and tweaking them. We were able to sit down and work together on, look, this is our process, and this is what we need to be able to show to executives or our other stakeholders, and quickly have an out-of-the-box solution for those needs, those demands, and show our executives and other stakeholders, look what we're doing, look where we're going, and here are some concerns, and so forth. So, some of our design principles, we needed something simple to use. Again, my goal going in to kind of resurrect the PMO was to really start at the fundamentals, the basics, getting back to proper project planning, being consistent in the way we build project schedules, because that data was key to the reporting. And as you all have heard, if you have crappy data, you're going to have crappy reporting. So again, spent the time up front to kind of go through that and nail down that process so that our reporting would add value. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the transparency, having a tool that enabled us to have that transparency with our executives so that they didn't feel like we were off in a silo selecting the initiatives that we wanted to work on. We were actually going off an ROI and some other factors in choosing the right initiatives to be working on. Okay, not a big bang. Yeah, we needed to kind of start off slow, kind of grow, and as the process and as the PMO matured, then introduce new reporting as we collected key data to support and validate these reports. So here's a little piece, kind of a snapshot of SharkPro and the solution, and I'm going to bring Greg up in a minute to kind of show you all a little bit about the out-of-the-box solution that we used. This is my favorite. This is our wheel of life at Children's. So any project that comes in, you can clearly depict our 4 key phases and the deliverables that they have to go through to be deployed. I'm seeing some smiles. You have a wheel of life as well? So, before I bring Greg up, I did. The gentleman had a question about, how do you leverage the tool on some of those issues like HIPAA compliance? And from my experience, the tools allowed us to be able to treat that as a program, and it's an ongoing program that's in our tool that we can bring visibility to and show our stakeholders and our executives that, hey, we're addressing this concern with maybe the way our devices handle patient data. And so they can clearly see the timeline for that component of the HIPAA program that we continue to improve on and treat as a program in our portfolio along with others. So, question?
How many projects are in that program? About?
In the HIPAA one alone?
Yeah, just HIPAA.
Yeah, I'd say right now probably about 6. I hope I'm not getting myself in trouble by telling you that, but you know how those things can be.
But how large are those projects? Duration-wise or cost-wise? Are they defined by greater than $250,000?
Yeah, typically on average they're about 6 months, but again, it just depends on the scope of it. Some things we're quickly able to address, in the matter of weeks, and we don't typically track those. We treat those more of milestones to show that, hey, we did complete it in the overall program view. But, yeah. Okay? Any other questions before I bring? Yes?
Ask what extent your organization migrated your data from HP and Project SharkPro, and you faced any specific challenges as you were.
Yeah, that's a great question. Faced a lot of challenges because, number one, there wasn't a consistent process being applied. So when I started looking at some of the schedules that were in PPM, some may have 4 line items, and some were 200 line items. So we had to spend a little bit of time in our transition to go through and do some cleanup, and there were things that didn't make sense to spend that effort and just let kind of live its life in PPM, and others we had to go through several steps to get the project schedule to where it needed to be so that we could migrate something useful over to EPM. In addition to that, there was components we had to add because we were leveraging SharePoint, so we needed a project team site created. So what I did was actually kind of cool. We took the time to have a conference room, and I set up stations. So as I brought the project manager in, and they had a list of their projects that they were assigned to, I'd say, okay, you go to station 1 where you're primarily going to focus on cleaning up your project schedule, okay? The next group, you're going to come in and, we're going to start you off on focusing on your project team site and SharePoint to make sure you've migrated your deliverables, like your requirements, your statement of work, other things that have already been signed off. Let's get those over there. And then I would have another group that we would focus on the reporting piece. And so I would just have them kind of, every hour march around through the room. And I mean, it was kind of cool. We got it done in a day, but it was a lot of hard work going up to that because, building the resource pool and the RBS structure, and because we didn't have a clean Active Directory, so it was not this simple Active Sync that you were talking about yesterday for us, but a lot of planning. But once we got started, it was a few days. But like I said in the beginning, a lot of things we left in HP PPM because they were so close to deployment, or they were just in such bad shape, and where they were in the process didn't make sense to spend a whole lot of effort to get them up to speed. Yeah, closed projects, we did migrate to a site in SharePoint as a repository, and we did add some searching functionality so that we, for lessons learned purposes, we could quickly identify based on application and so forth where that information was. Yeah. Okay.
What version of HP were you on? Were you using any kind of reporting or business intelligence, or business objects with that or something?
No, we weren't. And I don't remember what version of HP PPM we were on.
I might have it in the notes.
Yeah. I want to just wipe my mind of that, when I got started. I'm like, I'm not looking back. Yeah. Question?
So, you kept some project in PPM while transitioning to PPM. And if I'm a resource working on projects that are currently set up in PPM, and also another project in PPM, I'm entering time at both systems?
You were, actually, yeah. We would have the resources. If their projects stayed in PPM, they would have to enter time through PPM. Yeah, and also if they were assigned to projects in EPM, they would have to log time in 2 places. But again, that was a smooth transition. It was quick.
How many of those projects you have, right? So this one, that's just a 4-month period. Yeah, that's a little bit.
And that was part of our assessment with SharkPro. They offered, we can help automate that. But for me, again, it was only a handful, so it didn't make sense for us to spend that money on that particular piece.
So are you using this tool strictly for time reporting across the organization? So is this your goal?
Right now, it's just strictly for projects, right?
So let me ask, so one of the challenges, things that we're wrestling with is having the development teams, the business teams go into the server at their time. Right now, today, in our world, the PMs pull all the time out of the time reporting system and run it. And then we have conversations about what tasks they work on. We put in ways that we can do that at the PM level.
Mm-hmm.
Not huge chore, but somewhat, we're working
we're currently in the process of changing our ticketing system. So you got to separate the two. Right. There's your operational planning and tracking, which we've determined that we're going to leave that in our future ticketing system, and then we've set the precedent that all the project management efforts will be in EPM separately, and then we'll work on a solution to marry the two so it's convenient for the user to go to one place and see both time entry points, and they can do their project work right there, and then, oh, okay, I worked on that ticket to resolve that break fix for a few hours and apply it to our ticketing system, because they're both SQL on the back end. We're kind of going with the 80-20 rule that the admin time, we're going to say you spend 20% of that for training and all that other stuff. We're not going to track it, but what we're going to focus is on the 80%. I'm sorry? I believe they do. I don't really turn in my own timesheet. I'm sorry, so I'm kind of...
And we might be being hypersensitive and worrying about people having to go to two systems.
Of course, they complain a little bit, but eventually they get over it, and it's not that bad. But by removing the admin piece, so they're not tracking PTO and some other things, we said, look, we went through each group early on and said, what do you spend working on operations, keeping the lights on? What do you spend on doing projects? And, roughly it was around, 16% towards projects. So we set that allocation and we just managed that. So if it went over 16%, then we'd follow up. It was a trigger. It was a reason to go meet with that resource manager and say, okay, we agreed you were going to dedicate 16%. You've gone over. So, how you're tracking your operational time in the ticketing system, you need to make adjustments so that you've now moved 5% over to projects, and now you're only doing 75% to operations. So.
When you did a transition from the HP EPM to EPM, did you do a clean slate for the data transition over, or did you slowly migrate the data over? How did you do that?
It was a clean slate.
Started from the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the case studies, we did that with that app. They had from between 100 and 150 people using that product. Companies like share New York City, one of the affiliate marketing companies in the world. There's a lot of people managing resources now. That was one where recently we got to every bit of that data, existing projects, because they were using it for billing. They want to use it for billing, as internal customer billing and all that. So we actually migrated 100% of that data into a hosted environment so that they could then generate all their existing reports and capital, non-capital. That was just a big pull every bit of data into the system so they were able to transition from. Just kind of get a week sort of let's validate the data. Is this data going out with bills to be generated correctly? Codes are all right. Literally, it was a switch in one day. They were now reporting time since their system. Developers and stuff didn't have to go to 2 months.
And that's what we'll look at doing once we get our new ticketing system up and going is how we combine the two on the back end so that it is easier for the users to do time tracking. But also to answer your question, we've given the flexibility to the project manager as well. So you do have, resources that are assigned to task on your project going through the project PWA to enter their time to those projects so that you have actuals and it shows progress on the task. But at the same time, reality sets in that you have certain key individuals that aren't going to be bothered with time tracking, but yet they have spent a significant amount of time on the initiative where the PM can go through Microsoft Project Pro, drill down to that task, go all the way to the day, and actually put the actuals in for them, and they would collect it through the status meetings,
We do something for that.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but the key is to get that data so it's reflective of reality, and we could say this is how many hours we planned up front as far as a good educated swag. Here's when we did our final baseline, so this is what we're tracking to, and then here's what the actual was when we go back and we would actually report to our governance team or the group or committee, that approved the initial request. So, yep.
Since I work in some organizations having different systems like ticketing system like Remedy, where you initiate a request and create a task and assign to different teams, they notify. And since we are introducing the project server now there, so how to reduce the redundancy or how to feed one system to other? So do you have that type of experience of doing those things in your organization? Or you can answer that question?
Yes. So I think the question is,
If you have a trouble ticket system, in this case they've got Remedy, and we have one Florida hospital where they have another trouble ticket system, they're tying into projects. The answer is yes, you can tie them together. So through the project server, the PSI, right? That's really what that's for, is how do we think about how do we communicate between systems, because we want to make sure we're passing data. We've done it with Remedy. We've also had it where if someone went into the project server timesheet, it actually grabbed those tickets that person has worked on and pre-populate that project server timesheet with those tickets. So then they're not having a duplicate data entry in both. So if you think about that project server interface and you think about Microsoft, it's one of the reasons people move and migrate is it's a very extensible platform, right? So one of the things Microsoft does is here's a great platform, it's Office, SharePoint, we can do all these great things with it. So really think outside the box, just like you're doing. Okay, you've got all these systems now. Now let's think about how do we accomplish that? Make it easy. It might be that there's some programming, but that's all right. Microsoft lets us do that. I mean, that's what the PSI and the SDK lets us do, is do those kind of things. So there's a lot of different ways to do that.
So one has to write a code and some application on the top of the
It very well could be. I mean, the main thing is think about that user, and when they go in every day, what is it they see? And keep them in that environment they live in. I don't care if it's in TFS, I'm a developer, whether it's I'm in Outlook and I live within Outlook, or if I live within a website. It's just simplify that user experience that they have, so they're not having to go to 5 or 6 different places.
Okay. All right, if there aren't any other questions, Greg will come up and give us a spin.
Thank you, Aaron. Excellent. So we have about 7.5 minutes left, and it's good. We're asking questions as we go through it, so that's excellent. And I'm not so much going to really go through a detailed demo, right? So, because I think people can go by the booth. Again, I don't think Sharky's doing any demos tonight, because really it is all about fun tonight. So come to the Arizona Science Center. It's just really a good time. So you're not going to get too hard. But I did have a couple of folks say, can we just at least look at what is this whole SharkPro thing? So I'll just kind of show you a couple little items here. In essence, it is project server. So what I'm looking at is project web app. So some users that have looked at some of these other technologies, or they own Clarity, they own HP, let's say the @task, one of the things that they're interested in is a user experience. How can you give me some pre-configured options? So whether you're starting out with project server, you already own project server, this can be used on any of those environments. So all I'm looking at, for example, here is an executive. I could be an executive, I could be a program manager, a team member, and so all of this comes out of the box where I have these executive views. I have the option to do all kinds of drill downs to say, okay, for these projects, now I can see the health of the projects, and maybe I want to view a status report. Again, all of these come out of the box to start with. So when you think about project server, right, it's a great platform. There's a lot of configuration you can do. How can we get something that we can start with and then build from that? Or we have some organizations that say, I've already got project server, I want to take it to the next level. I want to light it up a little bit. Or in some cases, I'm a hospital, and I need to have a request system to capture all those requests from across the hospital, like in the case Children's or also St. Luke's. We have 7,000 users. Anyone in the hospital, nurses, doctors, anybody can actually put in a request in the system. I also have the ability to drill down into projects. If you notice, SharkPro has the timeline view on the web. Some of you are familiar with Microsoft Project, how you can create that really nice timeline view in Project 2010. So we've got that timeline view available on the web. You can actually pick which tasks you want, and it presents that to a user out on the web here. And I can also automatically look at where am I at in my governance process. So as you know, Project Server, you have those enterprise project types, and I can have the workflows. So we're automatically picking up and showing you where you are in the workflow, plus really all the information about the project or the program or the portfolio. So we're really trying to say, for this user, how do I serve up that data that they need to see on a daily basis? I don't care if I'm a program manager, executive, or a team member. And then maybe I also want to be able to, in this case, this is SharkPro projects, I also might say, I also want to look at data across the enterprise. So I want to look at how are we doing in our production control? How am I doing on my service desk? How am I doing on telecom? This is another application we have called the SharkPro IT Metrics Portal. So it actually pulls in data where I can say, for my production control group, here's kind of what we do, right? I'm change management, configuration management, and then I might want to look at the trends or current metrics of our IT environment. So just showing you a couple of different things here that if you think outside the box, whether you customize this from scratch or if you look at an out-of-the-box solution, there's a lot of options and availability that you have. So I'm not going to go into any more than this, other than the fact that I want to kind of close out a little bit by talking about a couple of other folks that have migrated from some other systems. But if you want to see this, you can come by the booth, and you know, a lot of really good, folks there demoing the systems. All right. So just in closing, it's not just HP PPM that folks migrate to Project Server. We've had folks migrate from @Task to Microsoft. We've had folks migrate from Oracle or Primavera to Project Server, very large organizations. Florida Hospital also today, I will tell you, their headquarters actually still owns Clarity. The Florida Hospital system, which is huge, said, we really can't tie into that system, and we really need to have these other functions. So they're using SharkPro and Project Server, and eventually they're going to make the decision that for the entire healthcare system, they're just going to go over to Project Server. So just to let you know, that's a case where they kind of still have it in another division for a while, so we can coexist. When we look at some of the work that we're doing, like I said, at Florida Hospital and some of the other locations where we've done replacements, we've also done it where, in this case, Bank of America, Global Wealth Management, one of the largest Microsoft project users in the world, big Clarity user. But they wanted Project Server in all their divisions, and this group wanted Project Server. So we were able to put Project Server in, but then just do a slight feed to it. Because I think, as anyone that uses Clarity knows, you can't use the latest version of Microsoft Project with it. And with any of these tools, typically I find people still want to use Microsoft Project, even the sites where they had @Task or whether they had these other systems. So just kind of in closing here, when you think about moving on up, and I call it moving on up to Project Server from some of these other systems, you have to justify, think about why you want to do it. When you think about the technology and migrating, that's really the easy part. You know, it's just a matter of thinking through, do you want to migrate all your data? Do you want to do a portion of the data? You know, what is that transition period? How you're going to do your training there? So there's multiple ways that you can think about doing it. And also, if you haven't decided to do Project Server yet, there is some options to make that easier. One is, do seriously consider looking at a hosted. Even if you use Project Server, and if you have an IT environment, there are hosted options available. I mean, we use a number of big hosting providers to offer it where we can do a pilot first, and then once you get your hardware in place, then you migrate that data in. Very valid option. A lot of times that helps facilitate a quicker implementation time for you. Also, obviously, we talk about showing that ROI quick. Get these dashboards out. I mean, all those dashboards you saw, those are all out of the box. You get those right away. You have to enter some data, but you're not basically building all of that dashboards and stuff from scratch. So Twitter, anybody Twitter follower? If you do tweet, Lionel is doing a huge prize for people that tweet or show up on this, right?
Margarita machine.
It's a big margarita machine. So there's no alcohol in it, but it's a margarita machine. So I just will say, one of the drawings is for folks that have a Twitter account that actually follow us on @SharkProSoft. And I think we have a couple of other Twitters, but that's the big one where we're going to have the prize. So I really want to thank everybody for attending today. I'll be here if anyone has any other questions. And then Aaron, I know, will be here for some other questions as well. Finished 4 minutes early, which is always a good thing in this day and age. Thank you very much for attending our session today.